little bit more that way. There you go. Okay, that looks good. So the first thing is go ahead and introduce yourself and what you do.
Okay, my name is Val Hoyle. I'm a former state representative and Oregon House Majority Leader. I represented West Eugene and Junction City. I'm currently a policy fellow at the Waymore Center for Law and Politics at the University of Oregon.
Wow, impressive. All right, so the first question was, why this passion for firefighter unions, especially Union Local 43?
So I grew up in a family, my father was a firefighter, and when he became a firefighter, he was making $96 a week and working 56-hour weeks. So $96 for a 56-hour week, and but that was the job that was available. And what I saw growing up was what he went through to be able to fight for rights for firefighters. And it was, it had a significant effect on our family, on his health. And so growing up in a firefighter family, and not just our family, but all the families that supported each other throughout that time, really built the values that I have as an elected official, as a community member.
In your dad's firefighting career, what were some of the issues that you observed that didn't seem fair other than pay?
So when he started in 1970, again, as I said, 1970, he was making $96 for a 56-hour work week. Do you want to wait till the truck comes in? Is that truck?
Oh my gosh, you got better ears than me. You heard that?
Yeah. So I'll just start. I know what the question is.
Yeah, what was it about your dad?
So when my dad joined the fire department in Nashua, New Hampshire in 1970, he was making $96 for a 56-hour work week. We qualified for food assistance. The uniform, so he became active in the union because he wanted to fight for better wages, hours, and working conditions. And when I say working conditions, at that time, they didn't have the same kind of, I have to think of the name of this, hang on a second. Yeah, self-contained. So when he joined the department, they didn't have the self-contained breathing apparatuses. They just had breathing masks that would freeze up in the middle of a fire. So they would have to take the mask off, let it warm up, and then put it back on all in the middle of a fire. They had, their uniforms were made out of rubber, so when they would go to a car fire and lift up the hood, the gloves would melt into their hands. They had to ride on the back of the truck. They were, they were significantly more likely to die or get injured. I mean, never mind the exposure to toxic chemicals. They weren't even thinking about that then. So my dad became active in the union and president of the union and fought for basic, fair wages, hours, and working conditions, basic safety things that we don't even think of. Firefighters don't even, coming onto the job now, don't even think of. But when he got active in the union, they sought to punish him, to break him. And so every year, right around the holidays, they would transfer him to a new station so that he would be on the bottom of the list and he'd have to work every single holiday. So I didn't see my father for Christmas, for years while he was active in the union. And then they put him on dispatch, and what they would do during contract negotiations, because, they'd be, he'd be working nights at dispatch, they put him on dispatch with someone that wasn't friendly to the union and not allow him to sleep. So he'd have to go negotiate during the day, work a night shift where he couldn't sleep, go back and negotiate, spend, after the negotiations, time calling all the members to make sure everything was all right, and then go back and work a shift. And it really affected him a lot. It affected our family, it affected his ability to be there for us as kids, but at the end of the day, he knew that it was important to fight for rights for him and the other firefighters there. But the one great thing about being part of a firefighter family is that you're truly part of a family, and he wasn't alone. And he knew that if he backed down and he broke, that everybody would lose. And so I grew up as part of this family, so as firefighter kids, firefighter families, we would go on vacations together, and people would step in and help each other. But I remember how difficult it was for my father, and he said there were times when he just felt like he couldn't go on anymore, but this is literally, he was fighting for the lives of the people he was working with. And for me, I got active in politics in 1974. I was 9, and I worked on my first campaign, and it was a campaign for fire commissioner, because the fire commissioner didn't think that they should give them better uniforms or better safety equipment. So I worked and knocked on doors at 9 years old saying, please vote for Dewey Letelier for fire commissioner so that my dad doesn't die in a fire. And that really was what prompted me to become active in politics. And as the president of his union, he was active in, and this was in New Hampshire, very active in local and national politics. So I got to work on presidential campaigns and state rep campaigns, and fundamentally, really made a connection to how much better our family did because of how active my dad was. So when he came in, as I said, $96 for a 56-hour week. When he left, a private in his local 789 was making $41,000 as a starting wage. So in the 21 years that my father was active in the union, that's the difference. And they had uniforms that didn't melt in high heat, really important. They had self-contained breathing apparatuses. For a time when they negotiated getting the investment for self-contained breathing apparatuses, the fire commissioner in chief put forward a rule that before they left the station to go to a fire, they would have to put all their equipment on. And so this was at a time when they were riding on the back of the truck, and he said, we lost a few guys off the back of the truck because it's heavy and it affects your center of gravity. And he said, so I would have to go and negotiate for very simple things, saying to them, this is not safe, you got guys on the back of a truck, this is too heavy, and they demanded that they put on their self-contained breathing apparatuses before they went to a fire. So eventually enough people fell off the truck that they were willing to allow them to put on their equipment when they got to the fire. But I think so many times people now don't understand how hard it was to get basic pensions. I mean, Local 43, like most firefighters in the United States, are not eligible for Social Security, and I don't think the general public understands that. So, for me, when city commissioners from Portland, there were 2 city commissioners that came to me to ask me to pass a bill, help them pass a bill to allow them to reduce the firefighters' retirement fund, Portland Firefighters Retirement Fund. And I said, absolutely not, because I remember what it was like growing up and seeing my father, nearly broken, trying to fight for basic wages, hours, working conditions, and a pension. I mean, the fact of the matter is, as I explained to one of the commissioners who said to me, do you know that some of these firefighters are making $100,000 a year? And I said, I don't understand what your point is. I said, how many other Portland City employees are making over $100,000 a year? Do you know off the top of your head? And how many of those men and women put their lives on the line every time they go out to a job? I mean, the fact of the matter is that firefighters have a significantly lower lifespan because of mental stress, physical, injuries, and also exposure to toxic chemicals. I mean, the fact that my father also, while he was president of the Firefighters Union, was able to fight for cancer preemption, much like we did here in 2009. But, there was like dead silence after I talked to this commissioner, and she said, well, that's a lot of money. And I said, what's a life worth? And I think that they are worth that, because I know what it took to fight for those wages. And fundamentally, when I came to the legislature, what I knew was that I am where I am today. I was able to get a college education. We were able to move into a nicer home. We were able to, have things like vacations and some extra money to work with, because my father put everything on the line to fight for that. And when I got to the legislature, my priority was to fight for firefighters. And the Portland firefighters, they have been unbelievably supportive. But at the end of the day, I feel grateful that I'm able to pay back some of what I was able to get growing up, some of the support that the firefighter families gave us through my actions as a legislator.
How did you get involved? I mean, you're a Lane County rep. How did you get involved in a Portland issue? Did the fire union contact you, or?
So I was I was a representative from Lane County, but I was the House Majority Leader. So as a House Majority Leader, I led the House Democratic Caucus. And when I came into office as a state representative, you have the Firefighter E-Board, which is firefighters from all around the state. And it was actually a pretty funny story. So I went into interview when I was a state rep, and my father called me and I said, I'm going to interview with firefighters to see if they'll endorse my campaign after I had been appointed in 2009. And this was a very tough race because being a Democrat in 2010 in a swing district in the whole state, there were only two of us that won, myself and Arnie Roeblen, and I won largely because of the support of firefighters in my district. So, I won by a very small amount, so I don't forget that. So I go into the interview and my dad called me and he said, I could send them a letter. And I said, Dad, I've worked with the firefighters in my area. I'm a Democrat, I'm pro-union, I'm a labor Democrat, and I don't think this is going to be a problem. But he sent a letter anyway to Tom Chamberlain and to Bob Livingston, and I don't know who else he sent it to, but I walked in and everybody's got this letter from my father saying, I'm a firefighter, and he listed, he's head of the Labor Council, president of the Labor Union, and listed his background and said, my daughter's been active in fighting for firefighters since she was 9 years old, and I would appreciate it if, you understand, I want you to understand that she's part of the family, and if you could look after her the same way I'd look after one of your family members, because she's part of the firefighter family. So I walk in and there's this letter from my dad, and they're like, we're going to support you. And they supported me not just in my election, but, Bob Livingston, he was there to be a lobbyist for firefighter issues, but he also looked after me and, Greg Matthews, who was serving, in other ways to help me be a more successful representative, because, and wherever I went, people would say, hey, you know what? Your dad put everything on the line for us, for firefighters. You're a part of our family, and we're going to look after you. So I was treated as if, I was a firefighter that was running, because, again, once you're part of the firefighter family, it's, and again, I felt like I had to respond in kind. So why did I help Local 43 with the SAFER grant, which was important? It's because I understand what it means. If they didn't have those extra 21 firefighters, the cuts would come in low-income districts like the one I represent here. And so this was about applying for a federal grant to bring federal money in, and the city commissioners were concerned that they wouldn't be able to keep these people hired. But without those extra 21 firefighters, it put people in danger, and not just the public, but actually the firefighters that would have to go out on calls understaffed. So when they said that they were going to go to the city council to advocate for this position, I went with them, because that's what you do. You show up, just like people showed up for my dad. He didn't have to do this alone. I mean, that's the great thing about being part of a firefighter family, is you're never alone, right? If there's ever a problem, you just got to pick up the phone. So why was I there? I didn't really see it as an option for not being there. The Speaker of the House, Tina Kotek, these cuts would have impacted her district. She was not able to show up, so I did, and I'm glad I did.
And that brings us on to the other question is, especially for the younger members, they don't see the value in a union and why why their money's going, where their money's going. What do you want the message to be to those younger guys and younger women about the value of union membership?
For me, it's so very clear. Growing up, when my father first became president of the union, they were not part of the state association. They kind of had gone out on their own. Their local had gone out on their own. And when they became part of the state association, they were able to get the kind of help they needed to make fundamental changes that protected the lives of their members, lives and health, and just general living conditions of their members. So without a union, you're just one person out there yelling into the wind. And the fact of the matter is, right now, we are at a greater threat, workers are at a greater threat than any time really in my lifetime. Right to Work. We have the Freedom Foundation that is really, really active in Oregon. And if you think for 1 minute that they're going to protect first responders just because, you do great things and the people love you, well, that's not true. The fact of the matter is they want to take your pension, your working conditions, raise your hours because they don't value the work that people do. And without a union, then it's each individual man and woman fighting for themselves. But with a union, the great thing about firefighters is the public really supports firefighters. So it's not only important for firefighters to belong to a union so the union can fight for them, again, wages, hours, working conditions, but it also is important for firefighters to be to be politically active because they are great third-party verifiers. When somebody gets a mail piece or sees someone on TV that said firefighters support this candidate, the fact of the matter is people trust firefighters. They trust firefighters, they trust nurses. So for the union movement, there really can't be better spokespeople. So it's important that firefighters are on the front line because I don't want to go back to the day where 9-year-old has to knock on people's doors to say, please, please vote for this person because the commissioner that's in charge right now doesn't care if my dad dies in a fire. Like I don't want any other 9-year-old to have to worry that their father is going to die in a fire because his air mask doesn't work. He's going to die because he's too tired, is going to have cancer and not have that covered. I mean, the bottom line is those are things that we fought for, but we have to continue to fight because unions are under attack, the labor movement's under attack, and anybody that sits back and says, well, I got mine and it's good, doesn't understand that we are at great risk of losing all those things that men and women over the past 100 years in Portland as part of the union have fought really, really hard to get.
And this is kind of redundant, but the other question was, why do their union leaders need to be politically active?
So I think the thing is when during election time, sometimes you'll see a very clear difference between elected officials. Some who are, you have someone who is clearly, pro-labor and appreciates the value of union and the importance of organizing, and some don't. And then you have a lot of people, I mean, whether they're Democrats, independents or Republicans, that didn't grow up with a union background and don't understand that value. So when they come to you in your local and say, I want your support for my candidacy, and firefighters are there for them, then it's really easy to go to them and remind them when they get to the legislature to say, hey, remember when we were there for you? All we need is for you to be there for us. So I think it is critical because I understand that I'm unique in that I grew up in a home where I really firsthand saw the value of union membership, and I understand the challenges that firefighters face. But most people don't have that experience, and so without talking to someone and having that relationship, they don't understand what they're voting on. I mean, we voted on a number of bills, whether it was the cancer preemption bill that was bipartisan. We only had one no vote in the House. And then we also stopped the practice, for nearly 18 years. There was a law that said battalion chiefs couldn't be a member of the bargaining unit, and we were able to overturn that, and we overturned it in a bipartisan manner. Again, for 17 years this had been in place, and every 2 years they would go back and we would try and get this passed. But the bottom line is I was able to be in leadership and be at the table and be a voice for firefighters. So, as I told some people when I was running for office, I went to interview and they said, why should we support you? And I said, well, when I was at the table, people understood. Everyone in the legislature understood if it was a law that the bill that the firefighters supported, Val Hoyle was going to be there, and I got them to the table. I was a voice for firefighters, and so it was my number one priority to make sure that we overturn this sort of ridiculous law that said that people couldn't be part of the bargaining, but battalion chiefs couldn't be part of the bargaining unit, and we were able to get it passed, and we celebrated, and it was a lot of fun, and it makes a fundamental difference in people's lives.
That was good, man. You are really good. So, I thought battalion chiefs were part of the command staff.
No, they were, but they
Now they're representing command.
they're able to be part of the union,
That's
and
great.
they were not before.
Okay, so the final thing, step it that way. I want you to
Say happy 100th anniversary.
yeah, introduce yourself, what you've done, what you want to do, and go and give a pitch for your.
No, that seems inappropriate.
Okay.
Because it's not about me.
Okay, just say who you are, what you did, and that you were a former rep, and that you want to wish the UFAA 43 a 100th happy 100th anniversary.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
Val Hoyle, former Oregon House Majority Leader.
One more time.
Okay.
Just there's a whole bunch of guys out there looking at you. Just say, what do
Okay.
you want to say to them about
Okay.
their 100 years of service?
Okay, so I'm Val Hoyle. I'm the former Oregon House Majority Leader and representative from West Virginia and Junction City, and I want to wish IAFF Local 43 a very happy 100th anniversary, and I hope that you will have a great 100 years more. Thank you so much for letting me be part of your team. It's been a great honor.
Great. That's all we need.
Okay.
I